Hello, everybody. Today I will be starting my last new what if for the current, and I'll move back to some old ones, which is what if Deku was the unwanted son of Monsoon. So so we all know that I've been gone for a little while because a lot of stuff's been going on. I was gonna have this one put up like 4 or so days ago, but well, I kind of had a good idea, which I'd erase my whole story and start from scratch for. So, yeah. So let's start, so you can see what I mean. Our book opens on Izuku Midoriya's birth. His mother, Inko Midoriya, a man who had a magnetism quirk. His father never wanted a kid, and by the time Inko noticed what was happening, he was gone. Just gone. Overnight, he disappeared. A few years passed, and Deku was like 6. All was good, till a criminal organization called Desperado arose. They caused havoc all around the world. They were trying to restart the war economy. They failed, thankfully. All thanks to Jack the Ripper, the number 2 hero, defeating their boss. But 3 members escaped being caught. These were the 3 highest ranking members of Desperado. The first was Samuel Rodriguez. The second, Sundowner. The third, Izuku's own father, Monsoon. But he didn't know that just yet. Their whereabouts are currently unknown. We advanced to the day that Bakugo and his goons were bullying another kid in the park. You know, that episode, the beginning. Deku steps in between the two and tells Bakugo to stop. And to point his aggression towards something more important, like his studies. Bakugo was taken aback by Deku's statement. So Bakugo says, well, I guess I could aim my aggression towards you. Then he launches an explosion at Deku. Before the explosion can reach Deku, a portion of a metal streetlight snaps off and strikes down the blast, like a baseball bat, diverting the blast away from Deku. It then launches into the sky, flips 3 times, and impales the ground less than a meter away from Bakugo. Bakugo is stunned. Deku falls back, astounded by what he just did. His mother comes rushing over, seeing what happens. She grabs Deku by the ear and hauls him back to the car. As the car starts, Deku sees Miss Katsuki pulling Bakugo away towards their car by the ear. As they drive off, Inko says, that was dangerous, Izuku, but I understand that it was an accident. But I think you may have your dad's quirk. But we're going to a doctor to find out. So they drove and arrived to a quiet hospital. It's empty except for one other person and the person at the front desk. The person that wasn't doctor, wasn't staff, was a young man, about Deku's age, with a ponytail and a metal body. His face is, well, for lack of a better word, if it was older, it would make most women swoon, but it simultaneously looked very punchable. He gets up, walks over, and says, your husband says hello. Before Ingo can react, he stabs Ingo in the chest with a katana made of air, rushes out the door, and vanishes into the wind. Izuku fell like a rock and started crying. A woman at the counter called the medics, and they brought Inko away. Izuku was there, still shocked, and, well, and he started crying. Well, didn't start, but kept going. But he started to understand what just happened, and after about a minute of there, he kind of collapsed, curled into a ball, cried himself to sleep in the fetal position. He awoke 3 hours later, covered up, curled up in one of those hospital recliners. The red-haired woman in doctor's clothing walked in the room. Hello, my name is Cheryl. She then points to her badge, which has the corresponding name. Her mother's having her wound taken care of. So me and a few doctors moved you here to wait. Your mother called in to schedule a quirk test, so I think we should get the results while she's getting her wounds healed. Shall we begin? They go and do all the tests, and the results come in, and Izuku's quirk gives him metal kinesis. Cheryl then brings Izuku to his mother's room, and the door opens, and Inko is in what can only be described as a full-body cast. Cheryl notices Izuku eyeing Inko's situation, tells him the stab wound severed her spine. Lower spine, anyway. And as a result, she will most likely never be able to stand on her own again. But this is the best case scenario. It would have been her dying, so we all should agree that she was lucky. But she'll need to be hospitalized for a while to make sure nothing else goes wrong. Once Cheryl finished her explanation, Inko said, "Come here, Izuku." Izuku walked over to his now hospitalized mother, and Inko grabbed his hand and looked him in the eyes and said, "You'll be staying with Miss Katsuki for a while. Make sure to not misbehave." Izuku replied to him, but what about you?" "Oh, Izuku, I'll be fine. Plus, you can visit me whenever you want, within reason anyway. Now, go wait near our front desk with this nice doctor," she points toward Cheryl, "and wait for Miss Katsuki to pick you up." Duke awkwardly hugged his mother, avoiding any cast parts. So basically, just neck it up. He then said bye and walked away with Cheryl. They walked through the halls in silence. They got to the front desk, and Cheryl sat in her seat. Deku sat on a couch, which was placed in the middle of a room. You know how they usually do that, where there's one, then directly across from it there's another in the same position, like maybe 5-6 meters away. He sat there, leaned back, and looked at the door. About 20-ish minutes. And Katsuki walked through the door, talked to Cheryl for a bit, asked what happened to Inko, the whole situation was dealt with, explained and all that. Katsuki took Izuku back to her place and told him that we would be sharing a room with Bakugo for a bit, and to just think of it like a long-term sleepover. So Miss Katsuki walked Deku up to Bakugo in his room, opened the door. But when the door was opened, it surprised Deku, as Bakugo's room looked near identical to his. He had a computer and desk at one side, shelves and a bed, all of which were in similar positions to his own, as well as a decent amount of All Might merch. Not as much as him, but still enough to call Bakugo a fan. Bakugo was surprised, and so his mother had to explain the whole scenario to a yelling Bakugo. He eventually understood, so Miss Katsuki provided a sleeping bag for Deku and told him that they would go to his home to pick up his possessions tomorrow. She then told them that dinner would be in a few hours and left the room. After about 5 minutes of silence, Deku starts up a conversation. "So, you like All Might?" Bakugo looked at him, made a face, and said, "Call it lame all you want, but you'll never be as good a hero as him, or me for that matter." Deku looked him in the eyes, told him it's not lame. "I have a lot more merch than this. If I were to call you lame for this, by extension, I'd be calling myself lame, too." Bakugo said, "What, really?" "Yeah, do you have, They trailed off, and hours of talking about heroes passed in the blink of an eye. "Kids, dinner's ready." The two got up and went downstairs, sat down, and kept talking, taking bites in between each sentence. Around halfway through dinner, they stopped talking, and Katsuki says, "So, I see you two are getting along." Mr. Katsuki says, "I never doubted our son." Bakugo just grunts, takes his last bite of food, gets up, washes his plate, and goes back to his room. Zuko finishes next, washes his plate, fork, and such, but before he goes back to his room, he asks if he could borrow a spoon. And, unknowing to what he was going to do, they said yes. He took a spoon, went back to his room. He sat down, and Bakugo's in the chair Bakugo uses for his computer, put the spoon around 3 inches from his face, and stared at it, concentrating, straining himself, and grunting. And Bakugo said, "What are you doing, Izuku?" Izuku replied with, "Trying to use my quirk." Bakugo sat up and asked, "Oh, right. What exactly is your quirk? Is it like some form of gravity manipulation, or telekinesis like your mom's?" Izuku replied with, "It's my father's quirk, or so I'm told. It's a form of metal kinesis." Bakugo's face lit up. Not in rage, for once. He looked real excited and said, "Oh, that's really cool. Maybe you could be my sidekick once you graduate from whatever hero school we go to." Yuka proceeded to put his arm out and shake Bakugo's hand. "I promise, Bakugo, you will be my sidekick." Bakugo grinned, and then his face started to turn into one of rage when he noticed what was just said. "Do you think you'll be a better hero than me?" Deku grins and says, probably. I mean, my quirk is more controllable. You are like a bomb on a high-powered slingshot. My quirk gives me a much smaller chance of tearing a building down or catching anyone who's in the way. After Izuku finishes, Bakugo starts yelling at him, and Izuku yells back. Downstairs, Mr. and Miss Katsuki went, there it is. And our sun never changes. Now it's jumped forward a bit. A week later, to be precise, Izuku was trying to control the spoon. He finally did, just not as he wanted to. He launched it out of his hands and whacked Bakugo's forehead. Bakugo got mad and yelled at Izuku, calling him by his new nickname, Deku. After this, for all of his school years, until the last day of middle school, Deku was training all day, every day, as long as he wasn't in school or doing something. To a point where he can, but by the end of this time period, it's to a point where he can lift up 3 cars if he tries his hardest. But he can naturally lift 1 car without any strain, just kind of finger flick. As he finishes a paper passed out by the teacher, he noticed a note on his desk. This was written by his essentially adoptive brother, Bakugo. It asked him to react to a speech that he was going to give to the class, and asked if he wanted to join. Deku grinned, gave him a thumbs up, and waited. After the teacher picked up the papers, the teacher threw them into the air, and before the teacher could say his whole shtick, his whole lines, his thing, Bakugo and Deku jumped up onto their desks and started using their quirks. Bakugo was creating firecracker-like explosions in his hands, and Deku had all the metal rings around everyone's pencils orbiting his hands. They started converging in balls, so he had 3 metal balls circling each hand, but about the size of 3 thumb lengths or so, or 3 yeah, but you know what I mean. Decent size, like baseball size, sorta. In unison, they said, "We will be number 1 and number 2 hero. We will be the number 1 and number 2 heroes and outdo all of you losers." As they finish, the bell rings, and Bakugo and Deku sprint off. Deku morphs the pencil part in what appears to be a skateboard with no wheels. He then asks Bakugo if he wants to race. Bakugo replies with yes, and puts a grin on his face. He creates a small explosion to propel himself forward. Deku keeps pace, and as they decide to end the race under the bridge. On their way, they decide to end the race under a bridge. Bakugo barely won by putting as much as safely could into an explosion and launching himself past Deku. They decided to take a break under the bridge, and as they were about to leave, the sludge villain appears. He then says, "You two will be fine, host. Seems my luck's turning around." But before he could get any closer, the manhole covers and pipes around Bakugo and Deku converge on the sludge villain. They form into a ball of scrap metal. Call the cops, Bakugo. Bakugo pulls out his phone. But before he can dial 911, All Might jumps out of a sewer and says, "Have no fear, for I am here." As he finishes, he asks if the two of they have seen the sludge villain. They both point towards a ball of metal and say, "We dealt with him, he's in there." All Might replies with an, "Oh. Well, that's good." And he grabs the ball, says thanks, and goes to jump off. But before he can, Deku asks him to autograph their hero notebooks. He proceeds to pull out 2 hero notebooks, one with Bakugo and one with Izuku, diagonally written across the cover in the largest font possible. So he says okay, signs a diagonal corner on both of them that isn't used, and jumps off. Deku passes Bakugo his notebook, and they walk home. They set their stuff in their room, eat dinner, end the day. The rest of the summer, they practice to get into UA, and eventually they decide to go to a beach about 2 weeks in. Clean it for training. They get there and start cleaning. After about 5 hours, the beach is spotless. They decide to go to the parking lot by the beach to relax. But on their way, they see All Might, another person. They walk up, strike up conversation. Deku's the first to speak. Are you here to clean the beach too? We just finished a few minutes ago. An astonished All Might says, you cleaned the whole beach by yourselves in less than a day. Yes, around 5 hours at that. It makes decent training. Plus, we're helping nature. It's a win-win scenario. All Might kind of surprised, agrees, and they start talking. Eventually, they say that they're trying to get in the UA. That surprises the young man standing beside All Might, so he asks if they want to join them. And Deku and Bakugo agree. So they train, spar, do all that. They learn that his name is Mirio, that he is attending UA. So they talk, train, more. They meet up all through the summer to train together and get much stronger. Izuku's at a point where he can pick up 5 cars simultaneously with relative ease. He can also tear metal apart easier and reform it much quicker and easier. So, that's an improvement. But this will do it for part 1. My next video will be continuing What If Issei was a Conduit. And I know a lot more people are enjoying that than my other What Ifs, so I'm going to continue that. So, this will do it for part 1. Stay tuned. Enjoy.